And this is the function of the immune system. And the primary part of the immune system isn't even the T and the B cell. The primary part is not even part of the immune system. It's the barrier that prevents 99.99% of infective agents from coming in. So I go, okay, let's take this story and put it in today's context. A virus is a device that carries memory that plugs into a cell and transfers the memory into the cell, and the transferred memory takes over the function of the cell. So a virus redirects the function of your cells to do what? Make more viruses. So a virus infects a cell, and then the cell creates more viruses. And when the cell has so many viruses in it, the cell breaks down, dies, releases the new viruses, which then go on and infect new cells, and it's a perpetuation machine. I say, so let's understand the cold virus. I say, what does cold have to do with it? And the answer is this. When the virus injects its information into the cell, that reproduction of the virus occurs at a temperature lower than body temperature, 98.6 Fahrenheit, for example. Viruses in the cold version don't actually develop very quickly at body temperature. They develop at colder than body temperature. I say, where in the body is the temperature colder? I go, the respiratory system, because the respiratory system is taking cold air from the outside, bringing it into the lungs, and having to warm it up to body temperature so it doesn't shock the system. But that means the air that's coming into the respiratory system is colder than 98.6 degrees. Relevance? If the virus coming in that air hits the surface cells in the respiratory tract, they'll infect them and they'll be able to grow, and especially in the wintertime because the air is even colder when it's coming in, the cold air dropping body temperature down to an adequate temperature for reproducing the viruses. So viruses grow like this in the cold. The virus, like a memory stick, plugs into respiratory lining cells, the epithelium, the barrier that was protecting you. Of all the barriers protecting the body from outside influences, the thinnest of all barriers is the respiratory tract. And the reason why it's so thin, what's the function? It's to allow oxygen to move from the environment into the red cells and allow carbon dioxide in the red cells to be released by going back into the air again. So in the lung are these structures like balloons called alveoli. And alveoli are like balloons that blow up when you breathe and contract when you exhale. And so every time you breathe, you can bring in bacteria and viruses. So you breathing, the virus comes down the throat. It's a colder temperature than the rest of the body. The virus has a plug that matches the barrier of the alveolus. And I say, so what does it do? Well, it invades the lining of the respiratory tract. Then what? Well, it proliferates. Then what? It causes the lining cell to break down. Well, if the lining cell breaks down, there's a secondary consequence. That is, now the outside environment is no longer being walled off by an epithelium. The outside environment can now enter into the body. And guess what is the closest thing right there? The blood vessels, which were bringing red cells near the air so oxygen and CO2 can exchange with each other. And I say, then what happens? Well, the viruses cause the destruction of the lining, but the destruction of the lining opens the system to further infection. So viruses that were reproduced in that dying epithelial cell, some of them go in, some of them go out. The ones that go out in your respiration. So when you breathe, you release viruses. But some of the viruses go in when the lining got opened up. And then what? Well, now that you opened up the lining, not only did viruses go in, but bacteria and other agents that are in the air can now also go into the body. So now there's a second part of the problem. The first part was I destroy the lining cells with the virus. The second part of the problem is now that the lining cells are destroyed, I've opened the doorway for invasive organisms to come in and take over the system. And that's where respiratory distress comes from. I go, well, what's respiratory distress? Breathing becomes difficult. I go, how come breathing is difficult? Go back to the original story. The alveoli, the bubbles are like balloons. They expand when you breathe in and they contract when you breathe out. But I said, but when the lining cells of the alveolus come off, the fluid in the body, remember the aquarium? The fluid in the aquarium starts to come out, and what does it do? Fills up the balloon with fluid. I go, why is there a problem? I say, air is supposed to be in the balloon so that the air can transfer oxygen and CO2. But when the alveoli become with fluid, air can't get in there. And I say, what's the consequence? You can't get fresh oxygen because the air can't go through all the water to bring oxygen into the blood. And all of a sudden you have to breathe harder, distress, respiration. And the more the infection takes place, the more the fluid comes into the alveoli, the less you're able to breathe. And there's a point where if you can't get enough oxygen in the system, it leads to death. So then I say, well, what about the immune system? And I go, well, the job of the immune system is to identify those cells that are infected with viruses and kill them before the viruses can reproduce. And if the immune system gets ahead of the game, it can keep killing any infected cell, replacing it with a normal cell before the viruses have a chance to replicate. So that's when the immune system is working. What is the problem? I said the race between the virus replicating and the immune system capable of catching up is based on how can I increase the effectiveness of the immune system to get ahead of the virus and shut it off? And the answer is, well, there are 4 fundamental things to enhance your immune system. And these 4 fundamental things, number 1, include providing nutrition. The immune system uses so much energy that out of your nutrition, if you are sick, most of that energy is going into the immune system function. So therefore, it becomes incumbent upon us to make sure we have proper nutrition that feeds us, and that means eating really healthy, organic, natural food, and not industrial farm food, which itself is toxic. Number 2, today's foods don't provide us with all the vitamins and supplements necessary to maintain a healthy body. So, in addition to eating well, then taking supplements such as vitamin C enhances the effectiveness of the immune system. Vitamin D enhances the effectiveness of the immune system. Interesting, human populations, especially in the States, are very low in those 2 vitamins. Without them, we are compromising the immune system, so taking vitamins and supplements adds to our health. Thirdly, exercise. You go, why? Because exercise is moving the blood, oxygenating it, moving things around, cleaning the lymph of the body, filtering out things, which is different than a sedentary person. The movement of the body is facilitating the movement of the circulatory system and the lymphatic system, and especially the immune system. And then the most important thing we must understand in enhancing the immune system, and that is stress hormones shut down the immune system. Now that sounds like punishment, and I go, no, it's actually an intelligent part of the system. If you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and you have an infection, remember, the amount of energy used by the immune system is so great that when many people get sick, they don't even have the energy to get out of bed. So the relevance about all this is we don't want stress hormones in there because the function of the stress hormones is to conserve energy to run away from a saber-toothed tiger by shutting off functions not necessary to escape the tiger. And that means shutting down the immune system. Stress hormones are so effective at shutting down the immune system that medical practitioners use stress hormones when they transplant a foreign organ from a donor into recipient. They give the recipient stress hormones. Why? To shut down the immune system to protect the newly transplanted foreign organ. So, my goodness, the effectiveness of stress and shutting off the immune system, it's used therapeutically. What's the point? Watch the news. Go on the internet, read the stories. Just start looking out your window and see all the crazy stress-provoking things going on. I say, that itself is increasing the virulence because the stress is preventing the immune system from fully functioning. And these are the 4 elements that will help you. And I say, well, how effective is it? And I say, up to 80% of the people are infected, but don't really show the symptoms. A mild fever, nothing serious. Only a smaller percentage are serious. I say, what's the difference? The large group, their immune systems are intact. Eating well, taking vitamins and supplements, exercising, and being free of stress means that they can be infected by the virus and not have any real adverse effects that would cause them to go see a doctor or go to a hospital. the small percentage that is affected, the reason they're affected and having a negative consequence is their immune system is not working up to full capacity. They are compromised. While 40% of the American population have 2 chronic illnesses that compromise the immune system, 60% of the American population have at least 1 chronic illness. So up to 60% of Americans are already compromised in their ability to withstand this infection. And when you are in a state of health, this infection is so minor that many people didn't even know they were infected. The high death rate, yes it is, but that's not a reflection of the virulence as much as it is a reflection of the compromised health systems of those infected. In conclusion, the fear that has been motivated by the media that this is so deadly is not accurate. It's really affecting those people who are compromised. And if we make efforts on our part to take care of our immune system, then we will not be subjected to the virulent activity that could lead to death in those people that are compromised. We are capable of having a strength to resist the influence of the virus.